Well, it looks like the war in Sinaloa is finally coming to an end, and the Chapitos, the faction of the cartel led by the surviving sons of former drug lord Joaquin Chapo Guzmán, are on their way out. On April 26th of this year, the U.S. Justice Department released a criminal indictment against 10 sitting politicians from the state of Sinaloa who they accuse of collaborating with the Chapitos. This includes a prosecutor, a state senator, the mayor of Culiacan, and the current governor of Sinaloa, Ruben Rocha Moya, who is a close friend and ally of former Mexican President Andrés Manuel Obrador. Why is this such a big deal? Well, not only is it a death blow for the Chapitos, who have been fighting a war with the Mayitos for almost 2 years, in a war that has killed and disappeared thousands of people in and around the city of Culiacan, but it signals a fundamental shift in U.S. law enforcement's approach to combating Mexican cartels. Instead of just focusing on taking down kingpins, which has been a losing strategy since the beginning of the war on drugs, the American and increasingly Mexican authorities are coming after the politicians who are protecting these kingpins. But it goes deeper than just dismantling organized crime. This indictment of Sinaloa's political elite, along with a recent CIA-linked car bombing of a suspected Chapitos member, is part of a covert, American-led attempt to subvert Mexican sovereignty and lay the groundwork for a possible military invasion. I'm telling you, this goes deep. There's so much to talk about, so let's just get into it. And before we get started, if you like this video, please drop a comment, smash that like button, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us out. Órale mi raza, vámonos. On July 25th, 2024, Ismael Zambada, aka El Mayo, the legendary godfather of the Sinaloa Cartel, was ambushed on a ranch in Sonora, Mexico, kidnapped, and then flown on a private jet to awaiting DEA agents in El Paso, Texas. And it pretty quickly came out that it was Chapo's sons, specifically Joaquin Lopez Guzman, who had set up Mayo to be kidnapped, and hence what led to the war between the Maisa and the Chapisa that is still ongoing, and has killed upwards of 10,000 people in less than 2 years. But what's even more interesting is that after his arrest, Mayo Zambada told American authorities that on the day he was kidnapped, he was supposed to be meeting with Ruben Rocha Moya, the governor of Sinaloa, about mediating a political feud that Moya was having at the time. Think about that, a drug kingpin helping mediate a feud between politicians. That shows you how much power Zambada had and how deep the corruption runs in a place like Sinaloa. Anyways, Moya never arrived at the meeting, and that's when Zambada was kidnapped and forced on a plane to the United States. And we know it was a double cross by the Chapitos because one of Chapo's sons, Joaquin Lopez Guzman, was also on the plane with Zambada. But he wasn't kidnapped, he voluntarily turned himself in to the DEA, so obviously that arrangement was made beforehand. This betrayal was almost certainly done to help Ovidio Guzman, Chapo's youngest son, who had been arrested a year and a half earlier in the second Culiacanazo, when Mexican special forces raided his ranch outside Culiacan, arrested, and then immediately extradited him to the US. But how does this tie into Governor Ruben Rocha Moya and the other corrupt politicians in Sinaloa? Well, as it turns out, Moya has ties to Chapo Guzman that go back decades. And remember how I told you about Moya's relationship to ex-president Andrés Manuel Obrador? Well, it also turns out that Obrador himself was intimately connected to Chapo. In fact, last year, an old video surfaced online of Obrador greeting Chapo's mother at a political rally in Sinaloa while he was still president. Incredible. And Obrador belongs to the ruling Morena political party, who control Mexican politics and who put President Claudia Sheinbaum into power. So, with Governor Moya's help, the Chapitos give Mayo Zambada up to the DEA, and the war between the Mayitos and the Chapitos kicks off. And Chapo's eldest son, Ivan Archivaldo, becomes the figurehead of the Chapitos and goes into hiding way up into the Sierra Madre Mountains. And despite Ivan being on the run, the cartel is still able to keep operating with the help of their old political connections in Culiacan. Still, the desperation set in pretty quickly. In May of 25, Chapo's ex-wife Griselda and 17 of their family members, including one of Chapo's daughters and some of his grandchildren, surrendered themselves to U.S. authorities at the port of San Ysidro in San Diego. Ostensibly, they'd agreed to give up information in exchange for witness protection in the United States. Shortly after that, a video emerged on social media declaring an alliance between the Chapitos and the CJNG, the Cartel Jalisco Nueva Generacion. That's how you know things were getting really bad for the Chapitos. You see, these mega cartels have extremely high overhead, even in peacetime, so a major war could have left the Chapitos nearly bankrupt. They likely surrendered some of their drug routes and drug distributors to Mencho and the CJNG in exchange for sicarios, for manpower, who they badly need because, let's face it, so many of them keep dying in the war. But then, in February of this year, the world watched as CJNG founder El Mencho was ambushed and killed by the Mexican military at a safe house in Jalisco. And then a few months later, just shortly before this recording, the second in command for the CJNG, El Jardinero, was captured and is now awaiting extradition. Bad news for the Chapitos, as that alliance has almost certainly been ruptured now that the heads of the CJNG are gone. And as all of this is happening, the US Justice Department, led by Marco Rubio, keeps turning up the pressure on the leaders of Latin American countries. The kidnapping and extradition of Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro is the obvious one, but Gustavo Petro of Colombia now has a target on him, as well as ex-president of Brazil, Lula, and of course, Cuba seems to be next on the chopping block. For benevolent or not so benevolent reasons, the US is coming after corrupt politicians with a vengeance, except for themselves, of course, but more on that later. And then, on April 26th, the Justice Department unsealed a 34-page indictment against Sinaloa Governor Ruben Moya and 9 other heads of the state government, including a municipal police chief, a lead prosecutor, the mayor of Culiacan, and the head finance minister for the state of Sinaloa. All of them are charged with aiding and abetting the Sinaloa Cartel, but specifically the Chapitos, in various ways, from drugs and weapons trafficking to money laundering to political cover. This is the first time in Mexico's history that a sitting politician has been indicted by the US feds. As of this recording, Ruben Moya has fled Culiacan and his whereabouts are unknown. But a few days after that, a cartel video surfaced online of some sicarios, presumably from Los Mayitos, shooting up Moya's vacant house in broad daylight. Now keep in mind, this is just an indictment. Mexico is technically a sovereign nation, and so it's on them to actually arrest Moya and hand him over to the US. This puts Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum in a tough spot. You see, Ruben Moya is a longtime Morena Party insider and a close ally of hers. If she extradites him, she risks her political career at a time when she's enjoying the highest approval rating of any Mexican president in history. The citizens of Mexico, by and large, hate the American government. Why wouldn't they? So extradition would appear as a capitulation, a violation of Mexican sovereignty. But more importantly for Sheinbaum, imagine what Ruben Moya knows. The decades and decades of corruption he and the Morena Party have been involved in. This is Mexico's version of the Epstein files, and it could all come out if he's handed over to the Americans. But if Sheinbaum refuses, well, just look at what happened to Nicolás Maduro. That's not impossible. The American government right now has Cuba in its crosshairs. But all over Latin America, the CIA and the Israeli Mossad are subverting leftist governments and sometimes outright removing their leaders. It's happening in Ecuador, it's happening in Brazil, it's happening in Bolivia, Colombia, obviously Venezuela, and now also Mexico. Check out this article I read the other day. The FBI, DEA, ATF, Homeland Security, and CPB are about to start operating out of a massive surveillance tower in downtown Ciudad Juarez, which used to be the most violent city in the world. Torre Centinela, the Sentinel Tower, is a 21-story high-tech security and surveillance command center built by the state government of Chihuahua. The tower functions as a surveillance hub that gathers data from thousands of cameras, drones, license plate readers, biometric checkpoints, and AI-assisted monitoring tools across the region. In other words, the Big Brother surveillance state has finally arrived in Mexico. and it's being done in conjunction with the American government. This tower will give the American feds access to millions of Mexican citizens' personal data, and behind this whole thing, of course, is the CIA. In fact, on April 19th, 4 men in the state of Chihuahua were killed when their car fell into a ravine and exploded. You might have seen this on the news. Later on, it was discovered that 2 of those men were CIA officers who had been conducting methamphetamine lab operations linked to cartel activity. And a month before that, on March 28th, a car bomb exploded near Mexico City, killing a Sinaloa Cartel operative, Francisco El Paín Beltran. According to reports, Beltran and another man were killed when the car they were driving exploded on a highway leaving Benito Juarez Airport in Mexico City. The Mexican government, of course, has denied the allegations of CIA involvement, but this killing reeks of a professional agency hit. And the target of the assassination makes it even more sketchy: a Beltran family member of the infamous Beltran Leyva faction of the Sinaloa Cartel. It's pretty clear at this point that the CIA is fully embedded in Mexico and is turning up the heat on the ruling Morena party and their allies, the Chapitos, in Sinaloa. But the million-dollar question that has yet to be answered is, will this low-intensity warfare actually lead to a full-on bombing campaign or ground invasion by the American military into Mexico? My friend Ed Calderon has been prophesizing this for years. I personally don't think we can put anything past the American war machine right now, especially as we lose power and influence in the Middle East. It's clear that the next battlefield for Washington, D.C. is Latin America, as we compete with China for resources and influence in this hemisphere. So, what does this all mean for the Chapitos and the Sinaloa Cartel? Well, the American indictment of these politicians and Ruben Moya has to be devastating for them. They've been so weakened over the past decade, first with the arrest of Chapo, then his son Ovidio, and now this war with the Mayitos and the death of their ally Mencho. The politicians in Culiacan were their last lifeline, and now they're all gone. Rumors have already been circulating that Ivan Archivaldo and Alfredo Guzmán Salazar, Chapo's only remaining sons left running the cartel, are in talks with the DEA to negotiate their surrender. That would be a smart move, because the end is coming, and new politicians friendly to their rivals, the Mayitos, will surely be installed in Culiacan. In fact, the Mayitos might already be working with the CIA, the way they did for decades under their patriarch, Senor Mayo Zambada. Remember, the CIA is directly responsible for the growth and proliferation of drug cartels all over Latin America. In some instances, like the Cartel de los Soles in Venezuela, they literally invented them. Since the 1970s, drug cartels have been a tool of the American government to destabilize countries who they view as hostile to their interests. But not the interests of the American people, of course. I'm talking about business interests: oil, precious metals, minerals, and weapons. The next play will be for rare earth minerals, as those will play a crucial role in the coming AI revolution. You guys, it's wild to think that the Guzmán drug dynasty, after nearly 60 years, starting with young Chapo himself working in the opium fields in his native Sinaloa, is finally coming to an end. It's a tragedy, really, looking back at it. His family is destroyed, and for what? It turns out he was nothing more than a useful idiot in a much larger chess game between the deep state forces controlling both the United States and Mexico. There's no doubt that this indictment of Sinaloa Governor Ruben Moya represents a fundamental shift in the way cartels operate in Mexico. The good old boy system of funding and rigging elections, bribing the president, and holding more power than the government itself, that's all done. Make no mistake, flock cameras and Palantir technology are coming to Mexico, and one day soon there will be nowhere left for cartels to hide. Not to say there won't be any criminal activity or drug trafficking, of course there will be, but it'll look something like the way it does in Europe. Very low-key and highly sophisticated. The cartels will trade in their military uniforms for business suits. They're already doing it. Or maybe not. Perhaps the CIA doesn't want this. Maybe they need the cartel armies to disrupt the progress that the current leftist government is making in Mexican society. Only time will tell. And as far as the Chapitos and Ruben Moya, that story is still unfolding. We'll be sure to keep you posted. Thank you so much for watching, and make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. My name is Johnny Mitchell. Take care.